What's going on, gang? We are here. It is time. It is showtime. Another industry chats. This week, we have dear friend of mine, Ruan Rothmann. How you doing, dude? All the way, all the way from South Africa. Hope our connection stays strong. Um, yeah, you guys might know Ruan from. He's one of the team, one of the dudes at Free Lives. He worked on a game everybody loves called Broforce. He worked on a game I love called GORN. Uh, I guess this is true. Yeah, maybe. I think so. I know there's a GORN. There's GORN stuff for sure. I and you have there's a oh those nobody's found the one you're thinking of yet. Nobody has found that Easter egg yet. um, but the arcade games, I don't know if you even remember me requesting that like a long time ago. Oh, you're hard to hear. Okay, no, hold on. Oh, wait, hold on. I screwed up the audio on this. Let me just change that. You are. There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry. All right, speak again.
Hello,
Yeah, there we go. Much better.
Twitch.
Yeah, we were just talking about secrets from Gorn and Broforce that are potentially buried and sometimes always monsters. Um, yeah, that was a while back. I mean, the first secret got buried. I mean, it's not really a secret. It's kind of like out there in the arcade. But yeah, the new secret nobody has found yet. Um,
All right.
so scoops, gang. Um, let's see. So, in addition to Broforce and Gorn, you've done other such games. Lot of jammy stuff. Particularly, I'm fond of
Yeah.
Frog Smashers. Is I think
Yeah, that might actually become a full game as well. We're considering doing like have I told you about it? Like a Switch version, but physical release only. So
okay.
there'll be like a limited edition run of like 5,000, and it doesn't go onto the eShop. Just to kind of see. I think it's a fun way to make a game. It's like a very unique way to
Yeah.
make a game. I think it affords you different kind of things, right? Like if this thing is like a limited edition only, you can actually make a local multiplayer game. You can kind of charge more for it in some ways because
Right.
there's this physical, tangible thing, and you can make the experience quite different. Like you can make it like small but intimate and very special. Where I think that's very hard to pull off as like a eShop game where you're just competing with so much other stuff.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It also like I mean right now the eShop is like super bloated. Like it's like even with good marketing and stuff, it's like really hard I think to get noticed on there. But like physical, you're able to like
yeah.
target directly and like uh, it's a cool. I mean,
Well,
I,
it's just something different, and I think it's also that cool thing of like if your friend comes over and you have a Switch, uh, you often don't have something that you can show him. But if this is like a physical release only, you can be like, oh, here's this game that almost nobody else has besides me, because it's physical thing only, so it's like something different. And then the Switch is just local multiplayer king. So actually, I mean, considering that this industry chats, I was talking to our publisher and some other people. The Nintendo eShop right now is the place to be. It's rivaling Steam for a lot of indies. It's doing super well. Um, Broforce has been on there for a little over a year and stuff, and it's like done over 100,000 copies. The other Devolver games have also done really well on eShop. Uh, Even Heave Ho was also a local multiplayer only game. Do you remember it was at
yeah,
E3
yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
the that also did like really well, like way better on the eShop than on Steam. Um, and some games are making more revenue, like my scale indie games that I work on and are around are kind of making more revenue on the eShop uh, than on Steam, which is kind of weird.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
it is kind of weird when you have like a long tail vision of Steam, but if you only look at Steam in its current state, like, I'm not surprised. It's pretty tough to like for most developers to have some real foothold in Steam, considering
Yeah.
the was it the Steam Summer Games Festival. They had a Spring Summer Games Festival, right? That had 40 games forthcoming with demos and live streams and all that. Then this year, the summer one, it's now 900 games, all
Yeah, it's
with
crazy.
the same level of feature, right? So like that, you know, it's much more difficult for people to find stuff that they like in there, and um,
Well, I think it's more just that the attention gets diluted, and it's kind of nothing. I don't know what you can do as a platform holder. You can't like give a million eyes on every single game. You kind of gotta
yeah,
share it equally. Um, and yeah, it's still that thing where you kind of gotta get captured in the zeitgeist a little bit. Otherwise, nobody pays attention. You can't just kind of make a good game and put it on Steam. It needs to kind of have some meme factor to it, like some kind of impetus for a person to want to talk about it. Otherwise, it just kind of goes by unnoticed. When we talk about games having a good hook, you need that hook, and you need people to tell their friend about the game for whatever reason. I mean, like Genital Jousting just kind of being like a good example
right.
of that. It's like once you see it, you feel kind of tainted, and you need to tell somebody else about this game, and that's kind of worked out for it. I mean, I think it's actually like it's a charming game as well, but it definitely had that factor. I think
Yeah,
it's getting harder and harder to make genre games that's just like a strategy game or a FPS game or whatever it might be, and to get that noticed. Where like I don't know, maybe still 5 years ago, yeah, 5 years ago you could still kind of do that, and if you made like uh, good indie FPS, it'll do all right. Now I don't think you can do that. Now you need like good indie FPS with dicks for it to get noticed.
yeah. It's interesting to think about. Like, General Jousting is an interesting case study, for lack of a better term. Like I like because it launched initially with just the multiplayer mode, right? And like
Mm.
it had a lot of the conversation, was around the, oh my god, what am I looking at? Uh, but like then later that the campaign, the story mode came out, which was like really smart and had a lot of conversation going on, but in a wholly different like context, right? Because it was talking a lot about like masculinity and like the issues surrounding it, and it had a really great narrative with it. So the talking points that surrounded it were like wildly different from like la 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 meme dicks to like yes very yes I think a lot when I play this. Um, it spanned a pretty big gap, and like I don't know, like do you care about like like still provoking actual conversation about your games, or we make very different kinds of games, you and I.
Right.
I don't think I could ever be satisfied with just the meme game, like something that was
Right.
just like even if it sold incredibly well, I think there's still part of me that would want that, dumb.
Yeah, the kind of artistic merit to it. No, I think I'm happy. I mean, Gorn doesn't have. Uh, it's a purely mechanical game. Like there are like some things that I put in and that we did to kind of make it more interesting, but that wasn't why the game was made or why it was interesting for me to work on. I think like those games are better games that have a message or have some thought behind them. I mean, like Broforce also wasn't ever about the political content, but it's definitely there, and it became more and more important as the game went on. I think General Jousting went through a very interesting transformation where at first it was just something that was really out there to kind of shock people with a little bit, but it turned out to be such an interesting conversational piece. It just like for how silly it was, it just generated really interesting conversations wherever it went, and I think that kind of those conversations surrounding how the game was played in the multiplayer uh, elicited the story eventually, and was like, well, we kind of do want to spell out some things here in this game as well. Even though I mean, not everything is one to one from watching people play the multiplayer, but I think that definitely did inspire it. If I work on a game, I don't, or my next game, which I don't know what it is yet, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Frogs actually has this kind of weird. So Frogs is a local multiplayer only game that you play sequentially through levels, and there is this like little bit of a story happening if you look at the backgrounds of the levels, and it's just kind of this frog society descending into war until there's only one frog left, which is like kind of funny. And it's like there's no depth there, but it's still like fun to put that detail there for people who are looking out for it. I think I can find my own meaning in making kind of meme or mechanical games, but I think like yeah, I think Gorn was the exception. Even if I were to remake Gorn now, I think that would be a bigger focus for me. Still kind of doing it as in jokes. I think a lot of the time because I think that amuses me more than spelling something out to the player. But yeah, definitely more of that. I think it's also maybe getting older and thinking about stuff more. I don't know. I don't want to say philosophically because that's always been the case, but like kind of being more like, oh, I actually only get to make like I don't know 5 games in my career, so I want to make each one of them count and each one of them be a rounded experience rather than just kind of making a game and just going with whatever comes out.
Right. That is interesting to think about. Like, but maybe that's true. Maybe we do only get to make end games in our lifetimes. I mean, it depends, I guess, on how much like commitment you want to put behind it, right? Like, you can churn out a jam game every month, every 3 months, right? And you can express something with each of them, or you can spend 6 years working on Sometimes Always Monsters and
Yeah,
say only
yeah.
one
There's
thing
like the
every decade.
breadwinners.
Um,
Yeah, but it's still like like well, we don't kind of know what's gonna happen with video games. Are people gonna look back in the decades to come for to video games? But still, like the biggest exposure that I've had to the world, most people that have seen or heard anything from me is people who've played my games. Just because, like,
right.
you know, Broforce has had millions of players by now, way more people than I've met. So that time that they've spent with me is only through my art that I've created, and maybe that's the only thing that persists from me on a significant scale after I die, like 10 years when everybody's pretty much forgotten about me. Um, so I think like that kind of thing where this is like the biggest ripple that I'm making on Earth is through the games that I'm creating. I want to put something there that's like interesting for whoever is seeing it.
Damn, you are feeling older, man. I can. Yeah, no.
I think it's also a thing where like you kind of you're able to kid yourself a lot with the first game or two that you make. You're like, quick adventure, 20 minutes in and out, it'll be great.
Right.
And then like you're like 2 years into it, you haven't slept in 3 months, you don't remember what any of your friends look like, you're just like surviving on like coffee and Adderall, and you're just like grinding this game out, and then eventually you're like, man, I don't know if it's possible to really make a game that I'm happy with without that super grind. So
Yeah.
if I'm starting something today, I know there's like a high amount of suffering that's inevitable in putting it out. So I want to suffer for the right reasons, not just some random game.
Hmm.
Even though I think like money is a good reason to suffer at times, but not not everything you make.
Yeah. It's see, I remember first game, and it was like, um, felt like the one chance I had. Like, I'm not gonna get another shot at this, so I got to do it right. And you put a lot of effort into it, um, and that, it worked. Like, that was good. Um, but it really did feel like this is the one opportunity you've got. If you screw this up, like, that's it. Um,
Mm.
and then I felt very similar about second game, right? Where it was like, okay, everybody thinks you're great now. Like, now what? Like, do something even better, right? Prove that right. And then that turned into 6 years of nightmare. And now I feel really different. I almost feel like I want to not care so much about what I'm creating, and like, um, you know, just produce. Like, have some
Right.
fun with it. I don't think I've ever really had fun developing games. So
I've had fun, but I wouldn't do that like kind of dedicate my life to just making this thing. I think that was like kind of the thing that I don't want to go back to. It's just being like so single-minded, being like I am working on video game and that's it. Because that's like 2 games in a row where I did it, where with like very little break in between, where it was like wake up in the morning, weekends, whatever times, and just be thinking about work and producing this thing constantly. I mean, I had fun doing it a lot of times, but I don't. You can't like do that your entire life. Like that seems like a bit of a missed opportunity for living.
right, right. So then let's talk about I guess the jam process, because that's a good way of getting something light and having fun with making games. So the most fun I've ever had making games has been at game jams and doing stuff that I knew had absolutely no consequence to it, and just going for it. Because I remember we did it. We when we went to Game Jam Island, I still was working on Sometimes Always Monsters.
Oh yeah.
Like I didn't even properly jam. Um,
Almost nobody game jammed there. I think like Frogs was the only real game jam project there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
your German
yeah.
Brawl sort of, but yeah. And I mean that's almost ironic because we're such a the culture at Free Lives, the whole ethos is really centered around game jamming at the core. All our games that have been successful and dozens of others have come from game jams, just as a method of experimentation and just as like, you can't really evaluate an idea until you see it on paper or on screen. And the only way to get there is to do a game jam.
right.
Um,
When at what stage in the jam do you know if you've got something?
I don't know. Genuinely, afterwards, it's so different for each project. Like it's each they seem to play out differently. Some feel magical very quickly. Like I think Gorn, for instance, was like as soon as there was a guy and you could like pick him up and smash his face through a wall, which was the
Right.
original prototype. Was there was like a wall and there was a guy and you could like grab him and throw him through the wall. That was like already like okay, this is what people want to do in VR. Clearly. Genital Jousting as well. Like as soon as that happened, then it was like good. But I think Broforce didn't quite immediately because it's like a pixel platformer, so it needs a little bit more. I think it was like,
Yeah.
it just kind of, and there was only like 2 or 3 characters in it. But then as soon as you play it, and there's like 8 characters, 8 different bros to unlock. It changes a lot, and then there were the American flags as well that you raised, and that like whole America aspect got into it. And then there was like, okay, there might actually be some magic here that's to explore further. But I think, or I mean, the kind of games that I make, like I have very little confidence in my own vetting abilities, so I want to make something that you can see very quickly whether it's good or not. So I tend to focus on ideas that are very small and can rapidly be tested. So the kind of thing that I want to jam, I want to be able to tell as soon as it's kind of remotely functional whether it's is working or not.
Right. How do you? I have a bad habit of like when I think of like a game I want to make, it's like always way too big. Like immediately, it's like way too big. Like first sentence of the game, it's too big. How do you come to accepting the small ideas? Like I have small ideas that come to me sometimes, but I always disregard them because I think they're too small. What? How do you come to accept them? Is I guess a good question.
I mean, I think it might just be personal taste, but I also think, uh, like telling one joke really well is like I tend to make funny games, but like that one joke or one moment is really what I center around. So that thing could be like small, but it can always grow. It's very easy to grow it, but it's like there's like one moment or one feeling, and I'm like, okay, this is the thing that I want to create in this jam, and then just go and find that like tiny little nugget, that like 3 second moment, and the whole jam is just about creating that little thing. And then it's very easy to add to anything and to make it as large as you want it to, but getting that like that magic moment is the hard part. I feel. W- but yeah, I generally don't even want to make big scope games. I want smaller teams, smaller scope games, as far as I can. So for me, that's not really an issue.
Has following a small idea ever led you to a roadblock? Like there's like an impassable wall where it's like, well, that's the joke told, and I don't know what to do beyond that.
I mean, it takes so long to tell a tiny joke well in a video game form that, geez, by the time the joke is told, you tend to be over it anyway. Um, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, maybe you look back at it and it's like, wow, did I really have to spend 3 years working on this game when I could have done it in a year and a half if I knew everything then that I did now? But
Right.
that's just life, like I don't think you're gonna get around that.
Right. So last week we had a guest on, Zalavir Nelson Jr., who wrote on Hypnospace, and we talked about game jams then, and he talked about like this big need in the games industry for pre-planning, for more pre-production time, and his advice was to spend a portion of your game jam time actually planning out a structure for your game. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Because I've seen how you jam.
No structure, no planning. You just go. I even like in normal production meetings, I'm like, this is all bullshit. No plan survives contact with the enemy. Like, just kind of start, like have a photo and try and recreate that photo in the game, and then as soon as the rubber meets the road, then you'll notice what's wrong with your plan. Because it just people like to kind of spitball ideas a lot, and then those conversations get so far from what's practical, very quickly, and at that stage you're already lost sight. It just seems that people, or we, when we make games, we're so terrible at planning that I'm like, don't even really bother trying to plan. Just plan the absolute minimum. Um,
Is that a game developer problem? Is that an industry problem, or is that a free lives problem?
I think it's a software problem, actually. I mean, if all this talk about agile software development processes is kind of just evidence that it's hard in software to plan effectively for lots of reasons. I think it's very much a free lives problem. I think our culture, the kind of games we make, I think we're like very good at running after shiny things in our game. Like you make something and then this turns out to be funnier than you thought it would be, or this element of this turns out to be better than you thought it would be, and then that's kind of what you work on. And then like later on you look back, like it was always funny looking at our like 6 months plans when we got to it, and it's like, well, we actually only did like 3 things on that list, but we did 20 other things as well, and kind of I think the game now is better than the one that was on this list.
Right.
um, so yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to actually try and plan something out, but I think then you possibly wind up even more generic. I don't know. It depends on what you're planning and what you're working on.
So then, how do you manage the chaos amidst the jam? Then, if you're just looking for the gold, and then hitting it when you see it, um, how do you make sure that it stays in some sort of a mind shape at the end of it?
Yeah, I mean that's the trick. I think that's kind of I don't know, maybe it's experience, but it's usually not that hard. Like you can just forget about the other things and just like kind of go for this one thing. Because like most game jam games suck, to be honest. Um, a game jam game that has one thing that's good about it is better than the vast majority of game jam games often. So even if you only get that one little good thing working, that's like a successful game jam.
Right.
Um, just going by the hundreds of game jam games that I've seen by now.
Um, okay, so let's see. Don't pre-plan. Find
Yeah.
what works in it as quickly as you can and focus on that. Um,
Yeah.
and don't stress about not having enough. Are these the takeaways? I guess.
Yeah, I would say that. Like find the best thing, one joke, one moment, or like one thing that you want to do, and just like focus on that for the game jam, and add around that, sure, but like keep focus on one element. Like if I think like if I were to make an adventure game for a game jam, for instance, I would have it on one screen, and like you can have more than one puzzle, but like think of it like I don't know, like a Curse of Monkey Island, only one screen, and that would be the game jam. If it's a story-based thing, it would be one interaction, one conversation, and just focus around that as much as I could. For me, I make games with mechanics generally, so then it's like one thing. Frogs, it's like juggling the other frog. That was all that I wanted to do. Is I wanted to make it fun to like hit the same guy multiple times, and the guy who was being hit to also have some agency in dodging that and stuff.
Right.
And just that one little thing. I mean, the game is still small now, but that thing was like kind of iterated on enough that that was actually good enough to kind of hold the game together. Broforce was just chaos and explosions and more characters, but like more characters is not like a thing that you can really game jam. You can only do a couple. I think game jams that have more than one mode, like more than one kind of screen, like a in-game level and a shop, for instance, tend to be worse. Though not always. Some of them do work, but then it's like usually with a very minor shop kind of element to it.
Um, okay, so that's good advice. I think we've got a lot of people who are joining the Sam Jam this weekend, who are complete first timers. This is the first time they've ever tried game development. Period. So it's hopefully expectations are framed appropriately, and nobody expects to walk out of here with a 10-hour long game.
Mm.
Um, but this is all good advice. But I want to talk a bit about like what are your least favorite. Look, what is the time you think you did the worst in a game jam?
Oh, actually, so before I started working at Free Lives, I didn't have any game development experience. I had some software development experience, but I saw there was this company that was hiring, and I was like, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to quit my corporate job and go work for this company." And I started learning Unity and started learning some game stuff on the side. And Evan had like a bad experience with hiring another programmer, and he's like, he just wants to get some game or to work together with me on a project a little bit. So we were like, okay, we'll do a game jam. And the one we did, could you remember the Peter Molyneux Twitter account?
Yes.
It's like a Peter Molyneux parody, and he tweets out like terrible game ideas. That sounds like something Peter
Right.
Molyneux would say. Um, and there was a game jam for make a game out of a tweet that he did, and me and Evan were like, okay, we're gonna do a game jam with that. And that was like just a terrible game. We did this thing where like you pretend to type, kind of like hacker typer, any button counts something, and in game you're also pretending to work. So when your boss walks past you, you have to pretend to type as fast as you can, and then when he's not there, you can be like lazy and not type and stuff. Then there was a debate with a pigeon. Um, it was just weird, and it wasn't fun, and it wasn't funny either. So that was kind of the worst game jam ever. I think we didn't understand the joke, and then we tried to tell three different jokes. So it was kind of some lessons there, and I think it was also just like super abstract. So yeah, that was kind of bad. I mean, I still got the job, so it wasn't that bad. The game was functional. Um, I think it's worse. Like recently, we went to Pirate Jam, which is like this game jam in Thailand. And I just like I started one idea, and like I wanted to try a VR surfing thing, and I just couldn't get the surfing kind of thing to feel good without being super nauseating. And I have like a very high tolerance for VR nausea by now.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't do it without it, because if you can move the player, and that's okay, but if you rotate, that's rough. Like if you rotate the player while they're moving, that's especially rough. I couldn't get it to to feel good, and I kind of abandoned it halfway. and then I started another thing, but then it was like, oh, there's just actually no ways that I'm going to be able to get this to anywhere remotely playable in the time I have left. So just like kind of two failed game jams in one greater jam is not great. But I think, I think if you're not never failing game jams, just like with anything else, you're kind of not really trying enough stuff. Like the purpose of a game jam is to try something that might fail. If you know you're gonna succeed with your game jam, what's the point of the experiment? I guess that's like for me, just thinking very much of game jams as experiments. Like, I wonder if this idea would work. I wonder if I could make this kind of mindset to them.
Do you wish that you had followed through on the surfing VR game to the end of the jam, even though it would have been destined for disaster?
Um, well, so again, like there was that one feeling that I want to get, which is like carving on a surfboard, where you kind of like, you go to the top of a wave and you lean back and you like turn, and there's that spray thing, and that's what I wanted to try and get right. Um, and then it was like, well, there were other things that did work if you just didn't rotate the player and you kind of move left and right. But I've played games like that. Like I've played a whole bunch of skiing
Yep.
games and other similar games where you're kind of moving forwards fast and you can move to the left and you can move to the right. So I was kind of like, well, okay, I can do that. I can make that. It might be okay. I can make it look psychedelic with some cool effects and find some cool music. And I think it would have been functional. It would have been like playable, but it wouldn't have been interesting. Like, I didn't see the hook then. I didn't see what kind of made that idea special. Um, the second thing I wanted to work on was just like a giant mech VR thing as well, and just like walking through a city and smashing buildings, something I've been wanting to do for ages.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want focusing on is just like, okay, so if you're in a big giant mech, what does it feel like when it walks? So it had this like, I just spent time putting in walk sound effects and the motion, so it goes like up and then like goes down, like this thing while you're moving forwards, and that worked. Like doing that in a city felt like pretty good. I was like, wow, this really feels like I'm in a big giant heavy mech, and if you can move the arm and see the arm move, and it feels like heavy and slow. um, but it's not playable. It's not a game that I can play, and making it playable means making an enemy, hundreds of effects, sound effects, polish, like difficulty and stuff, which is like would take quite a bit of time. But the experiment of, can I make this riding this mech feel awesome by making it like heavy and slow and massaging the motion in a specific way was a success. So I kind of feel that was okay, even though neither of them were playable in the end. That experiment was more of a success. So next time I can be like, if I have a team or I have more time because I don't start with it halfway through the jam, I could
Right.
be like, okay, we're gonna make mech in city game. I think it's gonna work, but like, how do we make the combat work? And I can work on that question, and that would be the experiment. Or destroying a building, which was kind of where I wanted to get to. But like, I'm gonna punch a building and I want to see chunks fall off it, and I want to see the building crumble. How awesome can I make it feel just like punching this one building? Um, and that yeah, that would be a game jam. But so yeah, it's weird. So even though I didn't, both of them were failures, I still think, especially with the second one, that it was a success in some ways.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, especially, I mean, at this stage in your career, I think it is important to like have the space and time to exercise those ideas you've wanted to do for a long time. This is not
Mm,
particularly relevant to, I think, that the first timers joining their jam tomorrow, but like, the longer I've worked on games, the more ideas for games have come, and the more I've had to accept like I'm probably never going to get a chance to make this one or that one. So having the freedom
yeah.
and the opportunity to like mess around with one or two of the ideas, even if it doesn't work out, is valuable in itself. Um, Even just to exercise those demons from my head.
Yeah.
Because you spend
No,
a
and
lot
I
of
think
time like you can get really hung up on being like, damn, I just wish I was making this other game that would be absolutely perfect if I was just making it, and then you know not true.
yeah,
um,
I think just another good reason for a game jam is learning a skill or practicing something,
right.
which might be more relevant to first timers. Like just being, well, I'm gonna learn RPG Maker, and the best way is to just try and pump a game out in it, or try and learn something in Unity. But yeah, I feel like it's gonna be hard for me to learn unless it's like some specific trick these days to find something that I want to learn in a weekend game jam.
Right. Yeah, yeah. There's also a big difference between things like the Pirate Jam and the Weekend Game Jam, right?
Yeah.
You usually have a lot more time in the other. Okay, well, so I think that's a lot of good advice for jammers. When it comes to presenting your game jam title, how do you I think are one of the devs I I think receives a lot of feedback from players, or at least like in my wheelhouse of developers, like in terms of the GORN community, getting bajillion requests for Broforce characters. Free Lives as a whole, takes in a lot of the voices from the players, and there, with that, I see has come, an ability to hear criticisms or requests or whatever, and not like feel pained by them or particularly upset by them.
Is that so? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
I
that's
can't
my
even
assessment.
I can't even read reviews for my games anymore, and it's like some guy like the final boss in Gorn is not very good, and it's like a negative review, and he's like, the person who designed this boss must be an idiot, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? I'm like, I'm a person, I'm reading this shit. Why would you like? Is that fucking? Let me find that fucking review.
Okay.
It's gonna be like one of the top ones. It's just, oh, god damn it. And the other thing about feedback, I mean, it's super important, and I'm very grateful for all the, yeah, to whomever designed the last boss in this game. You suck. Like like what? Like, that's just like a personal message to me. I'm just
Hold-
gonna, can I write the developer response? No, you.
Do it. First up, negative or positive review, and how many hours do they put in?
Negative.
Negative review.
2.
That man played through
2.5 hours.
he played through the entire
Yeah,
game, got to the final boss.
and then he was like, nah, like, I mean, I get that your entire experience is ruined by a perhaps not perfect final boss, but goddamn, dude, like, do I suck now because like you can't beat the boss in my game because your ceilings are too low? Is that my fault that you live in a fucking outhouse? I don't think so. Um, so yeah, and the other thing about feedback is that you tend to get the same feedback a lot, or things that occur to you, because you've like lived in this game for like however long. You've this has been your universe, and you've seen like dozens of people play it, so you know what's gonna occur to a new player, what their first like 20 thoughts are gonna be on the game, and then you like get those over and over and over again a lot of the time, and then what winds up being valuable feedback is not the feedback that people type. It's the subtle things and how they interact with the game, especially for my more mechanical games. So I find more value in just watching people play, just like hovering over their shoulders, or even better is like really bad YouTubers, like the 12-year-old kids trying to start their own YouTube channels and who will play like anything to have them play it, because they're kind of like being like they're very naive playthroughs, and they're kind of trying to make jokes while playing it, but they're not really focusing on that. They're mostly just like playing and being quiet. That's always been a super valuable source of like, what does it look like when somebody plays my game, with as little bias as possible, because people bias a lot. If you're hovering over their shoulder and watching them play, they're very biased. If they're playing the game on Twitch or something, they're like somewhat biased, less biased than that. But if they're a 12-year-old kid just trying to make a YouTube video because they want to be the next PewDiePie, that's very little bias. I think that's the closest you can get to like true feedback.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess next to literally sucking in as much data back through your game as possible. But if you go down that road, then you start you stop making games. I think I feel like if you're completely data driven, your intuition and your choice goes out the window. It's just like, well, the machine says I must make a door here.
I wonder what it would be like to try and make a completely data-driven game like that. I don't know. What is the most cynically you can make a data-driven game with the least amount of actual fan feedback?
Right.
We never really had data or anything like that in our games. At one point, we had level completion data for Broforce demo, and you could see, oh well, 20 people completed this level and 5% of people completed the next level, so this level must be way too fucking hard, and then we went to make that level easier, and that was really the extent of analytics that we've ever used.
Yeah. Well, when you start analyzing like heat maps in a Call of Duty game or whatever, like
Uh,
there's a whole, like, that's the whole AAA industry, right? Like it's
I would kind of love it though. I mean, I'm just like I'm fascinated by data and like learning things from it. So I would love to do that. I mean, right now we're like, I mean, Broforce has a campaign and you play through it and then the campaign is finished, with some other modes, but not a whole lot. But there are so many people that have 20 plus hours in Broforce, and really, I don't see there being more than 8 to 10 hours content.
right.
So what are all these people doing in Broforce after having finished the campaign at least 3 times? I think you could, even if you're a mediocre player, um, you would finish all the modes in Broforce in 10 hours, unlock all the characters easily, and we just have no idea what people are doing. Like, I think some of them play custom maps, but not a lot, because you can kind of garner some information there. So we just don't know what people are doing. So I kind of regret not putting more analytics in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a very valuable tool. Um, it is a tool that I have always been too dumb to implement properly.
There's no good analytics plugin for RPG Maker.
No, there's not. There really isn't. I mean, there might be on the new ones, but not on ours. Yeah, the best we've had to go by is like achievement data, and it's been kind of fun, like seeing the some of the choices that people have made via achievements, but those also tend to skew towards 100% completion eventually anyway. Right? Like the people who really care about your game or whatever, they're gonna replay and skew to a more full statistic. So they're only really valuable correlating with one another, not against like the game itself or against nothing, right? Like the baseline isn't zero. But anyway, like that's a very very far tangent from, I guess, the original idea here was, people are going to finish their jam games, and I guarantee a lot of them are going to feel self-conscious about putting it out there and getting feedback on their games. What do you say to those individuals who have that anxiety?
Yeah, I know, that's always been like my favorite thing. Is it's like scary, but it's also like, you kind of made this thing to be played and to be interacted with. It's always like very exciting. Like, is my joke gonna land? Is this thing gonna work that I'm trying? Like, are people actually gonna have fun with it? And then sometimes seeing people have more fun with it than you expected is pretty cool. More often than not, they have less fun with it than you expect, but then it's still kind of satisfying. I don't know. It's the best part about making a game is watching somebody play it and see them get some kind of kick out of it. So yeah, get a kick out of seeing people get a kick out of your stuff, I guess, would be my advice, and don't take it personally.
Right.
If they don't.
That's good. I really do hope people feel proud of what they make, no matter how low they think of it or how incomplete it is or whatever. Like, I really do hope you guys get excited about. I'm really looking forward to play it. Mitch has been popping off in chat. He says GORN is so much fun, and he agreed with me that making RPGs is a curse.
Yeah,
I agree. And getting advice from developers you respect is a bonus, though. Yeah, well, I mean, the advice, hopefully it's going to help. I mean, it's not going to make your game good or bad. It's just something to keep in mind. This is, I think it's gonna come from you no matter what. But I'm looking for Mitch. I've been looking forward to seeing what you whip out. Yeah, and then I can't read Spanish, so I don't know what that one says. Yeah. Okay. So that's game jamming. In a nutshell, I feel confident everybody's good with that now. I don't know what I have a very faint sense of what I'm gonna make this weekend. Okay. One more game jam topic. How often do you participate in like themed game jams, like where or the
they're almost all are themed, right?
Okay, yeah, like when you like a lot. I don't know how many of the audience have ever heard of these things, but like you'll go to a game jam and then like the day before the thing, they'll give you a keyword or something that you have to incorporate,
Right.
or like some inspiration. How do you feel about that process versus just like setting aside some time to experiment on something that you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, we often just ignore the theme because, like you say, you have such a backlog of ideas. I have like 10 things that I want to try, and I'm like very excited about this one particular thing, and I'm like, this is gonna be the jam. And then it's some shitty theme, and then it's just like, well, okay, fuck it. Or other times you have like maybe a couple of ideas in mind, and you hear the theme, and you're like, which one can I like squeeze this theme into the best? I think like yeah, I don't know. The themes often don't make for interesting games. I think it's just like it's a bit of a spark for an idea. Sometimes if you don't know what you want to make, but I've always had something weeks before the jam that I'm like that's what I want to try. That I've just like maybe we can change the art a little bit to fit this thing. Maybe it's not monsters, maybe it's robots or whatever, and then
Right.
it like kind of fits whatever the theme is. But yeah, other than that, if you're not sure what you want to make, then the theme is great to kind of spark off. Otherwise, like don't care. I mean, we've also just like we've had ideas that are a little bit too big. That's like one day too big for whatever thing, and then we'll just like cheat on the game jam and start a day early. Who cares? You're not doing it for the prizes. You're doing it for the experiment, the learning, getting the. You're doing it for the thing that you get out at the end. So, caring about the structure of the game jam isn't gonna make that thing be better at the end. I mean, if it's obviously if it's like something with a prize or some shit like that, then that's different. But if it's not, like,
Right.
who cares?
Let me reiterate: there are no prizes for participating in the same jam. um, that that's something that actually completely flies over my head every time too, because I assume I'm never going to win any. I guess competitive game jam, right? Like it's such a weird concept to me to like enter a competition for this. Like, I'm gonna show up with absolutely no idea what I'm going to make, and it's a nice talent flex, but I don't know if like it's particularly conducive to making like super interesting projects, or adhering to the theme and creating something that satisfies judges is not my top priority.
Well, we were in a situation like that with a game jam where we didn't have a lot of money at the time. It was pre Broforce. The studio was running out of money, and there was the Ouya at the time, that little indie console,
Yep.
and they were doing a game jam for that, and there was like a first prize of like $20,000 or something, and that was a lot of money for us at that stage, enough to save the studio. And I was like, okay, we can do this game jam and take like I think it was like 2 weeks to a month or something off of Broforce, and then if we win, then we have money and we can continue making games. If not, then we kind of probably screwed or have to come up with some really creative game jam. And then we did, and we made the game and we won the game jam. It was pretty cool. I can show a little trailer. It was called
Yeah.
Strange Happenings on Murder Island. It looks really good. The trailer is better than the game. Um, but like people only look at the trailer, so
Right on. Drop it in the chat, I guess.
yeah, some serious old school free live stuff there.
Right on. Let's see.
So I mean, this is different. This has a few separate things happening here, and there's like quite a lot going on. I think we were going for confusion in general with this, um, and dinosaurs with laser breath as well. But yeah, not generally a good way.
Hold on.
And yeah, I don't know about game jams with prizes either. Like, just make something cool. That's the real prize.
There we go. I think I'm showing it off now. Yeah, that does look pretty cool. So this is the make it or break it. Like, I'll run it one more time since I only figured out how to. There you go. You guys you had to make this work. Like this is what that pressure does.
So you went quiet there.
Oh, I said this was a make it or break it. Like this is what that pressure does. Like if you guys didn't win off of this, then you would have been 2 months further behind.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we would have done, but that was definitely, I mean, just kind of having your own money that you can rely on rather than a loan, or having to having anything have its own momentum, look for a publisher, wasn't as figured out then as it is now. I mean, it's easy to look back and be like, oh, well, you can just go to a publisher and pitch your game, but yeah, we weren't really ready to do that. We didn't really have anything to show yet. We're just like a couple of idiots from South Africa. Yeah, it was quite a game changer.
Well, that's a good game jam story. I guess very few people ever lose money on game jams, huh? Unless you're just buying packetfuls of assets. It's a good.
Yeah, I don't know. Average game jam, they get more and more expensive because I'm like just like, oh, I'll just buy like 10 asset packs and that's basically a game, right?
Yeah. That it's actually interesting to hear this story because I've had this small bone to pick with game jams and the game jam culture in the industry. Every time I've been to one, it feels like gambling in a small way. Like you turn up to the game jam and you really hope that you're gonna come up with something that's really not just worth the time that you've put into it, but it's like something that you can continue working on beyond, or it can turn into the next Titan Souls or something like that, right? Where it's this like great game jam that goes off the rails and turns into something really successful, and that conflicts with my own sense that like that's a very high risk thing to keep going in for, even though the cost of jamming is relatively low versus spending that time on a calculated plan. It seems to have worked for you guys, but I don't know if it's the right call for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think the calculated plan, how much time and effort you have to spend on that before knowing whether it pays off.
Yeah,
I think it's just for us now looking at a weekend or a week's worth of work is low risk to test an idea out compared to 6 months or a year production time for like a grand plan. And I think because we're just so risk averse, we don't have a government that will give us money.
Right.
So we don't want to take risks, and we want something that that gets proven very early and that we can iterate on.
Yeah, I don't think I've got a government that'll give me money anymore either.
Didn't they give you guys money just now? Just because, like, oh, it looks like there's a pandemic. Here's some money. And
oh yeah. Well, I mean, other money.
Our government's not doing that. Like, none of that shit.
Yeah, it's no, you're definitely right about the time suck. And you know what? I also think that the game market has shifted away from like people are just bombarded with so many games these days that I don't think anybody people didn't finish games before. I think people are finishing even fewer games these days. Never like
Yeah.
even playing games that can be finished, right? Like there's so many Infinity games now, and so many games. It's just like every 10 seconds there's like something new I want to play. Since I got back into actually trying to play games and enjoying games, like I'm just constantly like, oh, I'd like to try that. Oh, I'd like to try that. Oh, I'd like to try that. Um,
Yeah.
to the point where it's like, is it even worth putting any real thought and effort and plan into it, or just like here, have fun,
Yeah.
maybe if you like, good.
That decision paralysis is also kind of tough as a consumer. It's that thing where on Netflix you kind of wind up watching something you've seen before a lot of the time, just because there's too much choice, man. It makes it
Mhm.
tough. Uh, and yeah, I have no idea how people play games. Like, what's cool, what's actually happening there. I just hope that like I can find something that people think is funny or fresh. It's scary. At least I think the amount of new releases has not slowed, but has stayed constant now. I don't think there are games coming out faster than there were a month or 2 or 3 ago.
Oh, you mean we've
Uh,
reached the peak? Literally everybody who can make a game is making a game now.
I think so, probably, and I think like this global recession might be good. I mean, we you could actually see that we've had better sales during
Yep.
lockdown than before. Um, So, it's good on the creation side or on the for those who has games out. But yeah, it's always been so uncertain making games. I think like things have changed so rapidly since like I started doing this in 2012 like full time, and indie games and how indie games are played has changed a lot in like quite a few different things like Steam Greenlight and before Greenlight,
Yep.
and then now it's Steam Direct, and they've all really changed stuff. And for me, VR, which wasn't even around, um, and that's also changed a lot since it's been, since however
Yeah.
many iterations.
3 4 years.
And I feel like we've gotten lucky with timing on a bunch of different things. Where if GORN came out a year later, it would not have been noticed at all. Broforce also, in retrospect, was fortuitously timed to the nth degree, and I think like that's kind of what you want to be doing is gambling the whole time, because it's like the cheaper it is for you to roll that dice, the more chances you have to roll that natural 20. So rather play a game where you can like roll that dice every weekend than being like, okay, I get one roll, but I'm gonna like, rub this dice extra hard, blow on it like 5 times, and then like really will this die. It feels so random to me what succeeds and what doesn't.
Right.
I see games that look great that I'm like, this game deserves to succeed so hard. Like the scare and attention, it's clever, it's fun, it looks good, it's got all the things, and then it just kind of tanks. And I'm like, I can't. It's always easy to look at a game and be like, oh well, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. Like obviously it failed. But then if you're like, if I had seen this game before, I would have bet on it, like for sure, on it succeeding, and then it fails. And the other way around as well, where you like look at this game and you're like, this kind of seems to not to be kind of mediocre, but then it just kind of succeeds because of some X factor.
Right.
And I think it's better to try more things to roll that natural 20 than it is to take a measured approach.
Right.
That's why you game jam, to
That's why you
roll that
can.
dice.
Well.
So yeah, no, I think I think yeah, you're gambling, but I think that's like a good strategy. Just taking a lot of gambles.
Right. That's good advice. I personally feel closer to that than I have, I think, ever in my career. Like I'm really looking forward to this jam coming up this weekend. I hope everybody who's signed up is looking forward to it. Um, and I'm curious to see what comes out in 3 days, and to spend less time caring about stuff so much. It's not doesn't yield the best. I guess that's about it for this week's show. I'm gonna
Yeah,
take it a little easy.
yeah, it's 2 a.m. over here.
Yeah,
So
thank you very much for staying up late.
yeah, it's cool. It's been fun hanging out.
Yeah. Um,
I'll play some. I'm not gonna do the jam, sorry, but
no, that's
I'll
cool.
I'll play some entries.
Yeah.
see what's up.
Good. I'll bombard you with them when we're done. Just be like, here,
Cool.
games. Yeah, cool. So I guess thank you, everybody who tuned in. We'll be live tomorrow, pretty early, and I'll probably start my stream around 1. After everybody should be getting their stuff for the jam around 9 a.m. Eastern time, and then I'll probably be just streaming all weekend, the whole process. So feel free to drop in, drop out, whatever. Yell at me, don't yell at me, whatever. I don't care. Thank you, Ron, for hopping in and having fun with this chat and giving some great advice on game jams and your process and all that. And I don't know, anything you want to say to these beautiful people before we bounce out of here?
Have fun with the game jam, and thanks for having me. I think that's about it.
Right on. All right, cool. Catch you guys later.
Well,
We'll throw it on the thanks for watching screen, and I'll figure out who we're going to raid. Oh, and Empress, thank you for resubscribing. I'll catch you guys later.